Hello, everyone. I am Jodi McAlister. I am the author of Here for the Right Reasons, if I can ever find the right light for it so you can see the cover. This is my first novel for adults. So I have written 4 books previously for teenagers, including Livy Lawrence is Good at Pretending, which came out in May this year, and the Valentine series, which came out, sorry, I'm just getting the angle for these right, 2017 through 2019. So 4 YA books before now, but this is my first book for adults. And I have also written 2 academic books. So this is kind of my first book, kind of my 5th book, and kind of my 7th book, which is a bit of a strange place to feel like you're in when you're a writer. And so I know a lot of you are regulars with Better Reading, and you will know the drill. If you have questions for me, please put them in the comments and I will answer them as we go along. But I thought I would start by telling you a little bit about Here for the Right Reasons. If you recognize this phrase, you will already know what this book is about. So if you watch The Bachelor, if you watch Love Island, if you watch any reality dating shows, you will have heard people protesting that they are here for the right reasons over and over and over again. And oddly enough, they never tell you what the right reasons are. And it's very interesting to me that they're plural as well, like it's right reasons and not right reason, because if they ever do say what the right reason is, they say it's love. But I'm like, well, what are the other reasons? There's multiple reasons. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent. So this phrase is direct from reality television. So I am in Melbourne and I wrote this book during the long 2020 lockdown, the really hardcore one when we were only allowed to go outside for like an hour a day, and it was, you know, pretty lonely, pretty isolating, and I live by myself. So I think I went for a while where I don't think I'd actually touched another human being for 7 months, which I'm sure is deeply psychologically unhealthy. But during that time, I was watching The Bachelor, the 2020 season with Lockyer Gilbert, and they got up to their COVID episodes, and I was a little bit frustrated with how they handled it. I mean, they did the best with what they had, but I'm really interested by ideas of restriction in narrative. I think the more rules you put in, the more creative you have to be. And they weren't creative enough. They just tried to do The Bachelor but Zoom. And so I started thinking, well, if I was the queen of The Bachelor and could do whatever I wanted, what would I do? How would I put the show together? And so Here for the Right Reasons was born. So this is set on a season of a reality dating show, much like The Bachelor. It's called Marry Me Juliet, and instead of The Bachelor, we have the Romeo, where on the first night of filming, really hardcore restrictions are implemented and no one is allowed to leave, including the eliminated contestants. So this book, Here for the Right Reasons, is a romance between the Bachelor, essentially, the Romeo, Dylan, and Cece, a contestant he eliminates on the first night, but who, because of these restrictions that have come in, isn't allowed to leave the set. And I chose to do the romance in this way because romance has to have conflict to make it go, right? And a lot of romance is about 2 unlikely people finding love in really, really unlikely places. And with this one, obviously, I had a bit of a challenge in that the set of The Bachelor is essentially the most likely place you can find love. So I had to find an obstacle to put between Dylan and Cece, and I thought the fact that he broke up with her the second he met her was a pretty good one. So I won't spoil much of what happens in the book, but Dylan and Cece become friends, best friends maybe, and it's a romance. So I think you can guess what happens from there. A little bit more than friends, maybe. It was so much fun to write. I wrote it really, really quickly during the pandemic. And that was because romance has a guaranteed happy ending. And in a time as uncertain as that one, I think I was craving the happy ending of this book more than I knew. So that is a little bit about what this book is about. Now I'm going to look at the chat and see if there are any questions. So if you do have questions, make sure you put them in them now, and I'll try and get to as many of them as possible. Okay, so we have a question from Sharon. Hi, Sharon, who has asked, did you have any input in the cover? This is always a really interesting question to answer. Usually authors do not have that much input in the cover of their books. And with this one, I had like this much input, like the tiniest little drizzle, in that I was kept apprised of what was happening along the way. But Simon and Schuster, my wonderful publisher, actually developed 5 covers, and then they tested them with focus groups to see which one communicated best what the book was, which one had the best vibe, and which one screamed romance, because we really wanted to get this book into the hands of romance readers. And this one destroyed all the other ones. It defeated it hands down very easily. And I'm sure you can probably see why. It fits in very neatly with the current trend for these kind of illustrated cover rom-coms. But it also beautifully says reality dating show. So it's kind of hard to see here because of my light. But you can see here this contestant with Dylan has got a rose, which is very, very Bachelorverse. If you've ever seen any of the little animations on my Instagram, we've got little animated camera people that come in and out on the kind of bigger digital version of this cover. Now, even though this one like absolutely destroyed the focus groups, they were all like, yes, yes, this one. I'm sure if I had had extremely strong negative feelings against it and been like, no, never, then my publisher might have taken that into account. Obviously, they don't want to make their authors miserable, which Simon & Schuster has never done, just to be clear. So I knew what was happening with this cover in a way that you often don't with book covers, and was really glad that the focus groups agreed with me, because this was my favorite of the 5 covers too. Okay, the next question. Oh, it is from my publisher. Hi, Simon & Schuster. They've asked me what my favorite romance trope is to write and read. Wow, this is a really difficult question, because there are so many romance tropes which are really, really close to my heart. But I think my all-time favorite is Friends to Lovers, which this book kind of is. So a lot of Friends to Lovers, we begin the books with the protagonist having an established relationship with each other already. Friends, surprise, surprise. This book isn't that. Dylan and Cece don't know each other at all before the book starts, but they become friends before they become romantic. And the reason I really like Friends to Lovers, very complicated reason, is that I like it when people are nice to each other. And this is not to say that tropes like enemies to lovers do not have their place. The Valentine series, my first, these ones, my first series, these were enemies to lovers YA. And there's a lot of chemistry and kind of frisson that you can develop there. But there's something so sweet and so pure and so wholesome about Friends to Lovers. And so Here for the Right Reasons is definitely a Friends to Lovers book, though in a little bit of a different way than you might expect. Okay, so we have questions here which are quite similar, so I'll do them together. So Jane has asked, any more books coming in this world or universe? And Wendy has asked if I have another book in the wings. And the answer, I am glad to tell you, is yes. So in February, the sequel to Here for the Right Reasons will be coming out. It's called Can I Steal You for a Second? And it is set on the same season as Here for the Right Reasons at the same time. So concurrent, but with characters that you see in the background of this one. So if you get to the end of this book, I think you'll have a pretty solid guess who the main couple in book 2 are. But to give you a little insight, a little peek, this book is about the Bachelor and a contestant he eliminates on night 1. Can I Steal You for a Second is about 2 contestants who do not get eliminated. So they are still in the game. They are still competing for Dylan, who is the hero of this book. But instead of falling in love with him, they fall in love with each other. And I've just turned in a round of edits on that. So that book is nearly done. I'm very excited for it to come out in February. And then after that, I can neither confirm nor deny what will be happening next, but I would just like to wink very pointedly. Okay, the next question comes from Cassandra. Hi, Cass, who has asked, I would love to know what the most challenging part of the writing process was. This is a really good question because writing this book was a strange experience. I wrote it in a way that normally I don't normally write. So I'm usually a very routine-based writer. Not and I mean, I'm sure if you've been to a lot of these events, you'll know that every writer has a different process because everyone's brains work differently, and we all kind of have to learn to hack our brains in a way that will allow us to finish the manuscript. And the way I normally do it is use routine. So I usually have a daily word count, and I write early in the morning, so before I work. So I am a full-time academic. I write before 9 a.m. and then I'm an academic after 9 a.m. And then at night I'm very, very tired because that's a lot of writing. But with the Right Reasons, that whole routine went out the window. And I think it probably had something to do with that very strange, soupy, melty environment of the pandemic where I literally hadn't seen another person for months and months and months on end. Something in my brain just kind of snapped, honestly, and I binge wrote this book. And generally, I never write at night. I just don't do it. Like I begin my day clever and I get progressively less clever as the day goes on. And by the time it's dark outside, you don't want to try and have an intelligent conversation with me. But this one just flowed. And I wrote the first draft of this book. I won't tell you how fast, but unbelievably fast, faster than I've ever written anything and faster than I will ever write anything again. Like usually you find the writing time and the editing time is usually about the same, about 50-50. This one I spent a lot more time editing than I did writing the first draft, let's put it that way. And so the editing was actually the most challenging part of the writing process because what I had done in the weeks that it took me to write this book was essentially just like like what I like to call a vomit draft of a book, and tidying it up and making it coherent. That was really challenging. And another really challenging part was when I realized I wanted this to be more than one book and I wanted them to be concurrent. Obviously, the timelines had to match up. So I've got some very complicated spreadsheets that I refer to when I'm writing in this world at the moment, which has been a lot of fun, actually, because I'm usually not that organized. All right. The next question comes from Chloe, who has asked, what was my favorite plot to write about in this book? Nice question. What was my favorite plot to write about? Well, I mean, the obvious answer here is I really loved writing Dylan and Cece's romance, but perhaps more importantly, I really enjoyed writing their friendship. Because this is a friends to lovers book, but not in that traditional sense where they've become friends before the book started. I really put a lot of thought in how to develop that dynamic in a believable way, considering that the filming for a reality TV show and consequently their whole romance had to take place across 6 weeks. So I had to get them to a place where they were friends and then could jump from that friends into a romance in an incredibly short span of time. And that was a really fun writing exercise. So in terms of plot, writing their friendship and then thinking about how that would be romanticized is probably my favorite. But if we're talking about just favorite scenes, anyone that follows me on social media will know I have a lot of thoughts about how they construct the dates on The Bachelor. And so coming up with just the truly most ridiculous dates I could think of, the most nonsense reality TV show dates. Oh, that was so much fun. Which actually leads me, and this is perhaps a little bit of a spoiler, to Can I Steal You for a Second? My absolute favorite part of writing that book was writing the little date cards, the little invitations that The Bachelor, who's actually the producers, sends to the contestant. I made them rhyme, and coming up with the rhymes, that amused me probably more than I should say. Like it amused me an embarrassing amount. Okay, the next question comes from Anthea, who has asked me, what are some of my favorite romance novels? What a good question. And I could take up, how long have we got? 15 minutes. I could just like sit here and just name romance novels too for the next 15 minutes. I read very widely in this genre, and so I will preface this by saying that if you want more recommendations, you can look at my website, which is jodimcallister.com.au. When the pandemic first started, for the first 100 days, I did a romance recommendation every day, and you can find that list on my website. And I now do romance recommendations every Sunday on my Instagram under the hashtag Dr. Jodi Sunday Romance Rec. And so you can find lots of good ones there. But some of my absolute all-time personal favorites, my number one favorite author, like ride or die for her, is Lucy Parker, who is a New Zealand romance author. So her first series was set in London, in the world of the West End, so a lot of actors, and she's just started a new series where there's only one book so far. It's called Battle Royal, and it is essentially set a romance between two judges on a show which is very much like the Great British Bake Off, but they don't like each other very much. So I highly, highly recommend her books. I've also in my academic life been doing a great deal of research on romance fiction in the Philippines, English language romance there, and there are some incredible writers there who do not get the attention they deserve, because they're not writing in a kind of mainstream market. The books that they produce from romance class there, which is a little self-publishing community, are incredible. And two particular favorites of mine are Iris After the Incident by Mina V. Esquerra and Mango Summer by Age Lanera. But you can go to their website, romanceclassbooks.com, and see all the amazing books that they produce. They are all really, really incredible. And because I feel like I need to get an Australian recommendation in here, if you are not across Stephanie London, I love a lot of her books. She's got a series set in Melbourne. I'm trying to remember what the series is called. The book in it I particularly love is called Pretend It's Love, which is fake dating set in a Melbourne bar, but I think she is a wildly underrated author. And also Sarah Maybury, who is a long-time Australian romance author who not anymore, but wrote for Neighbours for a long time as well. And a book of hers I really love is a little novella called Must Love Coffee, about two people competing to be their local cafe's like most valuable customer in increasingly outlandish way. It's a really, really beautiful book. So like you can tell, I can talk about romance novels all day long. If you want any personalized recommendations, find me on social media. I am absolutely delighted to match people in romance novels. It brings me so much joy. Okay, the next question is from CJ Reads Reviews, who asks, are any of the characters based on people you know or have watched on reality TV shows? So the short answer to this question is no. I don't tend to just do kind of one-to-one, like, oh, here's someone I know or have seen, I'm going to put them in a book style writing. That's not my process really. Though obviously I do borrow bits and pieces here and there from people. But what was quite remarkable with Here for the Right Reasons, I wrote it in 2020, and the Bachelor in this one, Dylan, he's a lovely man. He is very, very, he's a cinnamon roll hero. He is very kind, and he's really too kind to be the Bachelor or the Romeo in this universe. And I wasn't really basing him on anyone. But then in 2021, the New Zealand Bachelor, Moses Mackay, is about as close to Dylan as you could possibly come. He was fundamentally too kind to be the Bachelor. And the best example I can give you of this is that when they had their little reunion show, he brought gifts for all of his contestants from his mum. He just pulled them out of a little plastic shopping bag, and it was so cute. So even though Moses came along well after I had drafted Here for the Right Reasons and knew who Dylan was, I was like, oh, you are the most Dylan Bachelor to ever Bachelor. What are you doing? My goodness. Did I create you somehow? It was very strange. Okay, next question is from Tracy, who has asked, are you a pantser or a plotter? I fall somewhere in between these two. So I've got strong pantser tendencies, let's put it that way. But I am moving increasingly towards the plotting side of the spectrum just for time management reasons, if nothing else. I'm never going to be a rigid plotter who writes a chapter by chapter outline and knows exactly what's going to happen in it. That's not the way I work. I'm a drafter and a redrafter, and often I have to write it down to get to where I think, to what I think or where I need to go. But usually what I do is I know where I want to end up, and I know a few of the points I need to get to along the way, but I don't necessarily know how I'm going to get there. And working out how to get from point A to B to C to D, that's some of the fun of the first draft. I think if I plotted it out very rigidly, I would lose some of that joy, that fun, which I need personally in my writing process. But with this series, because Here for the Right Reasons and Can I Steal You for a Second and Wink Wink are all set at the same time, I've had to be a little plottier than I perhaps have been in the past because the timelines have to match up. So I've got those spreadsheets. The next question is from Wendy, who has asked, what area of academia does your day job fall into? Very, very closely aligned with this book, actually. So I work at Deakin University in Melbourne, where I am a senior lecturer in writing, literature and culture, which means I teach about half and half literary studies, so English essentially, and creative writing. And my area of research interest is representations of romantic love in popular culture. So I'm really interested, kind of the central question behind a lot of my research is what kinds of popular stories do we tell about love, and how do they affect the ways that we think in our day-to-day lives about love? Because the love story is one of the primary ways we narrativize our own lives. The milestones of that story are something that we're all really, really familiar with. You know, yeah, you meet someone, you get together, maybe you sleep together, maybe you get married, maybe you have children. You can move some of these milestones around, but we all know what this story looks like, how this story goes. And you often hear, I'm doing some work on breakups at the moment, you often hear when people break up, they say, I have to go back to the beginning, which is a really kind of storytelling based term. It's a narrative term. Or they talk about a chapter closing and a new one beginning, which is another really narrative term. So I'm fascinated by how this narrative thinking affects the way that we do romance in our real lives. And some of the things I used to study this are romance novels, soap opera, and reality dating shows. So people ask me if I did any research for Here for the Right Reasons, and my first instinct is to say no, because I really did have the idea and started writing. And then I'm like, but the last 5 years of my academic career, where I've published more on the Australian Bachelor franchise than anyone else in the world, maybe that counts. So my creative and critical careers are deeply, deeply linked. Now we have a question from, my publisher, Simon & Schuster, hello, who have asked, you've got such an amazing wide array of romance theory knowledge. Thank you. What is a fun fact about romance or romance books that you can share with us? Oh, so many, but here is a really pithy fun fact. Sweet Valley High. I'm sure many of you know about Sweet Valley High. If you don't, famous like book packaged 80s teen soapy romance series. And Spark Notes, the bane of university lecturers everywhere, and also I assume high school students. It's kind of breaking down classic texts for high school teaching. Same guy behind those. His name is Dan Weiss, and he's a marketing genius targeting millennials, essentially. So he essentially was the mastermind behind Sweet Valley High. Francine Pascal, obviously the creative mind, but he was the marketing mind. He was the mastermind behind Spark Notes, and then he went on to coin the term new adult fiction, which I write about in my academic book, New Adult Fiction, which was a semi-failed publishing term for essentially young adult, but for readers aged 18 to 24. It didn't take off the first time, and then it kind of took off in a big way, coming out of self-publishing kind of at about the same time as 50 Shades of Grey, 2012 through 14. And then it kind of receded, and now it doesn't quite know what it is anymore. But that's one of my favorite facts, is that the same guy was behind these like great millennial institutions, and it blew my mind when I worked that out. Okay, we have a question from Chloe. Do you have any other rom-com books besides Can I Steal You for a Second in the works? None that I can talk about yet, but wink. That's all I can say to that one. And another question from Chloe. Are you inspired to watch other reality TV or drama for more TV rom-coms? Yeah. I think one day, perhaps when I've really worked through all my feelings about The Bachelor, which I have many about, as it's clear, I would love to do something a little bit Love Islandy, but I think the real challenge there with Love Island would be, again, working out how to make the conflict work. That is arguably an even more likely place to fall in love than the set of The Bachelor, because on The Bachelor you've got competition, you've got one kind of lead, and then many people competing for them. Whereas in Love Island, anyone can get together with anyone else. So how you, and it's also kind of filmed in a more Big Brother style with mounted cameras rather than like cameramen with like cameras over their shoulders or whatever. So you don't even have those people that you could be like, oh, but what if they fell in love with the cameraman? They're not there most of the time. So working out how to get enough conflict into that reality TV format, I think would really be a lot of fun. I think that would be fascinating. Do we have any more questions? If you have more questions, keep throwing them in because I've answered all the ones there at the moment. What can I talk about while we're waiting? Let me think. If you don't have a question, I would also like to hear about your favorite reality dating shows because I'm really interested in which ones resonate with people. So personally, like I've been watching The Bachelor for like 100 years and I get frustrated with it all the time, but do I stop watching it? No. I'm very intrigued by Love Island at the moment, but I truly cannot with Married at First Sight. It won't work for me. It won't land. But my favorite reality dating show is a Japanese one called iNori, which is on Netflix. And if you haven't checked that one out, it is the most pure and wholesome dating show that has ever existed. And I truly, truly recommend it. And I see we've got a recommendation from Mel in the chat there for Beauty and the Geek. Oh, what a sweet recommendation. And also one for Farmer Wants a Wife. Yes, good Rex. Now we have a question from Cassandra. Hello again, Cass, who has asked me who my favorite bachelor is. Interesting question. In Australia, I think it is probably Dr. Matt Agnew, the astrophysicist. To me, the hallmark of a good bachelor is that they are able to have conversations with the contestants and draw their personalities out. The worst bachelors are the ones where the conversation is flat every time because they don't allow the contestants to be interesting, essentially. And I think he did a really good job of drawing out contestants on his season. And while she has clearly made her own career herself, I don't think it's accidental that media icon Abby Chatfield comes from his season because the format allowed for her to shine in a way that maybe with a less eloquent bachelor she might not have been able to. So I think he's my favorite. My favorite bachelorette is Brooke Bulletin, obviously. I think last year she was brilliant. We have a question from CJ who's asked, was there a reason as to why you decided to use multicultural people in the story? I thought it was a brilliant idea. Well, first, thank you. Secondly, reality dating shows generally, and The Bachelor in particular, have huge problems in the way they romanticize whiteness. And this is something I run across all the time in my academic life in terms of love stories. If you only put certain kinds of people in love stories, then what you kind of train people to think is that only certain kinds of people deserve love. And so if everyone in a love story is white, then what is that saying? And the fact that Dylan is the first non-white franchise lead is a big plot point here, because I don't think you can write a book about reality dating and not grapple with the fact that it has perpetuated a lot of racist stereotypes over time. And in this particular season, the franchise is trying to take a big step forward, but it's not without growing pains. And so I thought it would be irresponsible for me not to use a diverse cast in this book and not to kind of approach those issues head on. Question from Emily: what would I love to see more of in romance books? Obviously what I just said. I think we can we can all do with some more diverse romance. The more kinds of romance there are, the more people that tells us deserve love. But what I personally want to see in a really like trashy way is I want to see some romances set on vineyards. I really like wine and I really like going to vineyards. It's one of my favorite things, and I have actually like quietly told my publisher this, like, can you acquire some romances about wine? I would really like to read those. So the serious answer is we need to continue the kind of push towards diverse representation across all different axes in romance. But my like trashy personal answer is just give me some romance novels about wine. So I think we are just about out of time here. It has been, oh, thank you, Wendy. That's a lovely compliment. I hope my students feel the same as you. I hope that turns up on my my teaching evaluations. It has been a delight to spend this time with you. If you need any romance recommendations, come and find me on social media. I am always delighted to match people to romance novels. So give me a few parameters. Be like, oh, I would like a Friends to Lovers, and maybe I would like something set in the world of competitive baking or whatever. Give me a parameter or two and I'll see what I can come up with. So you can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook. Like, I'm very easily Googleable. You can find me. But I will let you get about the rest of your evenings. I would be delighted if you would pick up a copy of Here for the Right Reasons. And don't forget that the sequel is coming out in February. So if you read it now, you'll be prepared. And hopefully when Can I Steal You for a Second is out in February, I'll be back here again talking to you then. Good night, everybody.